Hi there, I'm Cindy Russell and this is Spotlight on Cirrus for June 10th, 2023. I am here with a very special guest tonight. Most of you, if you have lived in Cirrus a really long time, know him as Vern May. He's born and raised here in Cirrus. Yeah, worked here a little bit here and there.
A little bit,
yeah. Others know him as Vance, Nevada. That is your in-ring persona.
Yes.
And you are here to do some wrestling tonight.
Wrestling tonight.
Yeah.
You know, it's exciting to be here in Souris because I would say that, you know, I was a fan of wrestling as a kid, but it was really the first time that my dad brought me to wrestling. It was a live wrestling show in the hall when I was 10 years old that made me a fan. And it was actually one of the wrestlers that was on the show that night. He wrestled as Chi Cruz. He was always billed as being from East Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought, oh, that's pretty exotic, you know, and I never thought that it would be real to be a wrestler because nobody from Souris, Manitoba or these farm towns, you're always from a big city.
Mm-hmm.
And one time I was doodling on a notebook in the classroom and a good friend of mine, Morley Dooley, was sitting next to me and he said, oh, my cousin's a wrestler. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, my cousin is Chi Cruz. I said, you're lying, man. Chi Cruz is from East LA. He says, no, he's from Hartney.
What?
And then at that point, it just kind of like the context, like suddenly this is something that could be real, that we could do. And then, you know, as I learned, as I sort of got to know wrestling a little bit more, there was a very successful wrestler out of Verdun named Eddie Watts. Greg Nicolation was his given name. And he was having success in Mexico and Puerto Rico and all across Canada.
Wow.
And then you know, as I started to travel, I got to work with these guys, you know, and of course, then I was being billed from Phoenix, Arizona or somewhere exotic. And, you know, so it was Eddie Watts, Chi Cruz, and myself traveling a lot across Canada. Yeah, so it was a pretty cool thing.
And so you've been doing this for 3 decades now?
Yeah, May 13th was 30 years for me.
Wow.
And in that time, I've wrestled in every province in Canada except Quebec. But I'll be wrestling in Quebec this July, so we're going to check that off before I'm done.
Awesome.
And in that time, I've had more than 1,600 professional matches and have held 46 championships.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations, that's amazing, that's awesome. So this Souris is your last stop in your Manitoba tour right now, and then where else besides Quebec are you going before you're done?
It's been really interesting. So like I had taken, when I came back to Souris in 2013, I was completely out of wrestling. You know, I was looking to do something new and different, and got into municipal economic development, kind of by fluke. And discovered that, you know, promoting communities in the way you do as an economic development officer is not really all that different from how you promote yourself as a professional wrestler, only now you have a budget to do it, and you actually have
A budget that isn't your own, right?
yeah, and more resources and office time, dedicated office time to make it happen. So I thought that I wouldn't go back to wrestling at all, and it happened as a bit of a fluke. The promoter actually of tonight's event, Danny Duggan, he was doing these really long tours where he'd start in Winnipeg and they'd go all the way to Vancouver and back. They'd do like 26 nights in a row. But when you're working a schedule like that, then guys get injured.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was on the back loop of that, and he was coming through Verdun, and he said, listen, we're a little bit too far out from Winnipeg to get a guy. Could you sub in one time? And I thought, well, geez, I haven't wrestled in 5 years. I don't even know if I can still go. And went out and had the match. And other than being winded, because I didn't have the ring conditioning, I wasn't hurt. And so then, you know, we started, well, could you fill in here? Could you fill in there? Mm-hmm. Next thing you know, I'm on the road again almost every weekend with Danny across Manitoba. And then we moved out to the West Coast, and the schedule was similar. It was pretty active until the pandemic happened. And then when everything shut down, it gave me time to focus on another project because there was nowhere to go, right? And as you know, we couldn't go out. There was no place to be. We couldn't even gather as family. So focused my efforts on writing a book. And spent 18 months writing and researching, and fully expecting that the book would never get completed because, you know, as I would get into it, then everything would reopen and we'd be back to action. But it didn't go that way. So the book did get finished, and for me, I've been really fortunate that, you know, the release of the book last summer has sort of like energized interest in me as a performer as well. So this year, already 2 weeks ago, I was in New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island. This week we're here in Manitoba. In 2 weeks I'm on Vancouver Island. And then Prince George, Lethbridge, Kelowna, Ottawa, back to New Brunswick again in the fall. So yeah, but we're, you know, going towards the end goal. My wife doesn't believe it, you know, and I say, yeah, this will be the last year. She said, that's what you said at 20 years.
Right.
I said, yeah, but I think 30 years is a nice round number. Plus, you know, I'm also recognizing more and more after the matches that this really is a young man's sport, right?
I was gonna say, like, it must take a toll on your body after 30 years of this.
Absolutely it does. You know, I'm currently operating with a fully torn ACL ligament in my left knee, and the sports clinic said, yeah, we could fix it, but you're probably at your age at a greater risk of having complications due to blood clots when you're immobile. And if you've got a knee brace that's making sure that you can't do further damage, then just soldier on. Probably eventually down the line it'll be a full knee replacement, but and I had, while I was living in Manitoba 5 years ago, spinal fusion, L4, L5, so I've got 2 metal pins in my lower back, and I feel like my neck is the next thing to go, so but
So it's maybe time.
it is time.
Yeah.
It's time to find a more relaxing pastime, maybe origami or something like that.
Or some more books.
Maybe some more books.
More info that people need to share for people.
Yeah, I think that there's some really exciting projects that we're looking at. There's a few Canadian photographers. One was from Regina, one was from Winnipeg, and they were prolific. You know, they were followed wrestling for 30 years, and so they have some like really iconic images of professional wrestling, like some that have been published in magazines and over the years. But both of those gentlemen have passed away, and now I'm working with their families to say, what if we did a book that celebrated the best of their work? So that'll probably be a winter project to sit at home when I don't want to be out on the roads, and put together some of these really, you know, commemorative books that celebrate the legacies of these gentlemen and their careers as well.
That's good. So you still get to keep wrestling in your life, just in a different capacity now.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my wife is looking forward to having me home more.
I bet. Yeah.
Especially, you know, this year, because the travel has been so busy, and so much of it is very aggressive. You know, a few weeks ago I was in Ontario, and you fly into Waterloo, you get there at 4, someone's there to pick you up to take you right to the venue, you wrestle at 7, back to the hotel, up at 6:30 the next morning to go to the next town. So it's not leisure, but if you're sitting at home and you see, oh, you're going here and here and here and here, it sounds really glamorous. And like, hey, I wish I could travel as much as you, but believe me, you don't want this schedule.
Living in hotels sometimes can wear on you just
It certainly
as
can.
much as a regular job.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So besides maybe the book, once you do fully retire, if you fully retire, will you teach it? Do you have plans to keep it more in your life besides the book?
Yeah, you know what, I think, you know, part of it will still be mentoring because, you know, now as I have require less time of my own to focus on my own endeavors, you know, I try to spend as much time when I'm at the wrestling matches watching the guys that are coming up and, you know, giving them advice and sort of helping them like, hey, here's an opportunity for you to avoid the mistakes that I made, you know, as a young performer, or here's how you can advance your career or be more compelling as a character, or, you know, and have greater success and put yourself in a position where you can make a living. Because I have had a few wrestlers that I trained early on that have gone on to success with the WWE, and so that's really cool when somebody that you've mentored and trained now is an action figure.
Absolutely, yeah.
So probably still doing a little bit of that, But I also know, like, from when I got out of the wrestling industry before, that it's very hard if you're not in there to be there. And when you see somebody go out and have a match and you feel like, oh, I could be doing way better than that right now, or, like, I don't see them, if they're a bad guy wrestler in particular, I don't see them really owning the crowd the way that they could. So I know that if I'm not in there, I need to fully get out of the arenas altogether. And, if they're looking for advice and feedback, they can just send me their YouTube clip and say, could you watch this match and give me the notes? Because it is, unlike anything else.
I bet it is.
When, in a wrestling environment, to be able to go into a room full of people that you've never met before and get them so emotionally invested in what you're doing, to take that journey with you vicariously, when you get body slammed, for them to be cringing in the crowd and feeling it. But when you're, have the momentum going, to have them be behind you and be excited for you, there's really nothing else like it. So
It sounds thrilling, to say the least. Like, that's putting it mildly, I think.
the highs are very high,
Yeah.
but the lows are very low.
Yeah. I won't keep you much longer because you have a big night tonight. Just want to, I seen a headline and it says, say goodnight to the bad guy.
Yeah.
Where does the bad guy
Well,
come from?
very early on in my career, I think I had wrestled about 2 years, and the promoter that I was working for said, because I started when I was 17 years old and had a full head of hair, was the young, milk and cookies, good guy that all the kids liked. He said, we're gonna turn you bad. And at first I was kind of like hurt by that. Like, why do you want to make me the bad guy? And he said, kind of tongue in cheek, he said, we're gonna make you a bad guy because you have a face that's really easy to hate. And I was like, okay. And it took me a little bit to absorb that, but it ended up being the best thing that could have ever happened, because when you have a wrestling organization, so for example, this organization, the Canadian Wrestling's Elite out of Winnipeg, they've already built their local in-house good guys. Like, these are our Hulk Hogans that we want people to cheer for. What we need to do is always have fresh villains for them to be challenged by. And so in that way, by being a really capable villain that understood my role in that capacity, it allowed me to travel more than anybody, because I'd call the promoter in Newfoundland and say, hey, could you use a guy that's like, yeah, we've got this guy and we're building him up. We need a credible villain to come in and make people believe this guy's an even bigger superstar. And so you could do that, especially now, like through videos on social media, really, trash talking that guy, and then you come in and you make that guy look like $1 million. And so he's gonna sell more tickets next time, and then they fly me home, right? Their hero has conquered another villain. And so in that way, I've been able to travel a lot, and knowing that that's my job. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna aggravate as many people as possible, sell as many tickets as possible, and then go home. And so that's been really good for me. Now, because of the book tour, I'm most often cast as a good guy, but it's almost foreign to me now. It's almost uncomfortable to be looking for cheers from the crowd. And earlier this year, I was in Regina speaking at an elementary Catholic school, and I said, it's very unusual for me to be in front of an audience that's cheering for me. So if you could all help me out right now and just boo as loud as you can. Yeah. And it's also a tremendous icebreaker in some of those environments as well. And it's also helped, in roles I've had in public work, in municipal government, because people that work in these roles genuinely want to be good people, and genuinely they are. Yeah. And so they don't like it when they get criticism from the public for what they do or how the public perceives they're not doing their job. And for me, I've spent 30 years as a villain, so when people say, oh, that Vern May doesn't know what the heck he's doing, I don't care. No. You know what? Until you've walked a mile in the shoes, right? You don't know what the challenges are, what the obstacles are that the general public doesn't know. So it's kind of been, a really, exciting journey in both worlds. Yeah,
I bet. Well, thank you so much for coming and doing this. Thank you for making Souris your last stop in Manitoba, and I think it's going to be a great night tonight.
I think it will. You know what? you know, when we put the dates together, I was excited to be here. I know that I'll have a lot of family that are going to be here. I think my grandma is going to be here tonight. And it wasn't until, like, I think about Portage La Prairie today as we were driving out from the city where, you know, now I started to think, like, I might get a little bit emotional, you know, when you're like, okay, this is the last time in this building, which was the first place that I saw wrestling live. So I just hope that I don't cry in front of the people.
They'll see that good guy behind the bad guy.
They might,
yeah. See you. Well, thank you so much. Have an amazing night tonight. Have an amazing rest of your tour.
Yes, absolutely.
And good luck in the next step of your life here.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Cindy Russell, and this has been Spotlight on Service for June 10th, 2023. Have a great night.